Don't waste your time showing her diamonds. She can't even afford the box they come in. My mother's voice sliced through the air like glass. The boutique went quiet. Even the soft instrumental music seemed to stop. I stood there in the middle of sterling and fine jewelers, pretending the words didn't land. But they did. Every single one. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. The young sales clerk blinked, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. My mother's smirk gave her the answer. You can show me the new arrivals, she said smoothly, her pearls catching the light. My daughter's just tagging along. I'd heard her tone before, the kind that dripped with fake charm while poisoning everything around it. The kind that made me feel 14 again, not 28. My throat tightened, but I forced a calm smile. Actually, I said, my voice steady, I came here for something specific. My mother gave a dry laugh. What, a catalog? I ignored her and turned to the clerk. Ava Carter. I placed an order last month. It should have arrived this week. Before the poor clerk could respond, the boutique manager appeared, sharp suit, confident stride, the kind of man who carried authority in his silence. He stopped when he saw me. His face lit up. Ms. Carter, he said warmly, we've been waiting for you. Your custom diamond line from Paris just arrived this morning. Come with me. We've set up a private room for your inspection. For a moment, nobody moved. My mother's lips parted slightly, her smile freezing mid-curve. Excuse me, she said. There must be some mistake. The manager shook his head. None, ma'am. Miss Carter is one of our private clients. Her designs are exclusive to the Laurent collection. The clerk's jaw dropped. A few customers nearby turned to look at me, their curiosity sharp as camera flashes. I looked at my mother, her confidence unraveling in slow motion. For years, she'd told everyone I'd thrown my life away chasing art. She'd laughed when I sold sketches online, said real success came from marrying it, not earning it. Now she stood in the very place she'd mocked me, surrounded by jewels I had designed. I followed the manager into the private room, heart pounding not from pride, but from something deeper, release. Inside, the table shimmered with pieces that had once lived only in my sketchbook, delicate curves, hand-cut stones, and the small engraved signature, AC. The manager smiled. They're exquisite. Laurent was right to call you a prodigy. For a second, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled as I touched the necklace I'd spent months perfecting. My mother appeared in the doorway, pale and silent. I met her eyes. You were right, Mom. I can't afford to buy these, I said softly. But I can design them. The silence that followed sparkled louder than every diamond in the room. The sound of heels clicking against marble followed me out of the boutique. My mother's voice trailed close behind, low, sharp, and furious. Ava, what was that stunt supposed to prove? I didn't answer right away. The automatic door slid open, and the Manhattan air rushed in, cool and alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small walking beside her. I felt seen. I turned to face her under the streetlight. It wasn't a stunt, Mom. That's my career. Her lips pressed into a hard line. Since when do you have a career? She snapped. You're telling me those jewels, those ridiculous prices, are because of you? Yes, I said. Every sketch, every design, every sleepless night you called a waste of time. Her face reddened, and I could see it. The battle between pride and disbelief. You should have told me. I laughed, softly but bitterly. You wouldn't have listened. You never do unless there's a price tag attached. She opened her mouth, but I kept talking. Years of silence finally broke free. Do you know how many times I almost quit? How many days I worked double shifts at the diner just to pay for materials? And when I called you, hoping you'd say something like, I'm proud of you, you said. That you were being unrealistic, she interrupted, her tone brittle. Exactly. My voice trembled, but I didn't hide it. You never believed in me until it benefited you. Her expression faltered for just a second. Guilt, maybe. But she looked away, hiding it behind that same old mask. Ava, I wanted you to be secure. To have stability. No, I said, stepping closer. You wanted me to live your version of stability. Marry rich, stay silent, smile at parties. You never cared what actually made me happy. The traffic light turned green, painting her face in a strange hue, half envy, half realization. You sound just like your father, she muttered, always blaming someone else. That name was a punch to the chest. Dad believed in me, I said quietly. He supported my art until the day he died. You erased that part of him because it didn't fit your perfect picture. Her jaw tightened. She didn't respond. For once, words failed her. I took a slow breath and started walking toward the curb. You know, Mom, for years, I thought success would make you love me differently. But it won't. And that's okay now. She followed, her heels clicking faster. Ava, wait. Don't walk away like this. I'm not walking away, I said, turning back to her. I'm walking forward. Her face fell. Maybe for the first time, she saw me not as her daughter, but as a woman who no longer needed her permission to shine. Before I got into my car, she called after me one last time. Ava, everyone was staring at me in there. You humiliated me. I paused at the door, hand on the handle, and met her eyes. Now you know what it feels like. The city swallowed her silence. As I drove off, tears blurred the skyline. Not of sadness, but release. The weight I'd carried for years finally lifted, piece by piece, like broken glass swept from a floor. In the rearview mirror, the jewelry store lights glowed behind me, sparkling like a reminder. Sometimes, the most beautiful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rising where they said you couldn't. And I wasn't done rising yet. 2 months later, I stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Paris skyline, my reflection caught between sunrise and city lights. The Eiffel Tower glimmered faintly in the distance, and behind me, the showroom buzzed with excitement. It still felt unreal. My debut collection, Lumiere by Ava Carter, was about to launch at Lauren's annual fashion gala. My sketches, once mocked as scribbles, were now displayed under glass, surrounded by reporters, stylists, and collectors from across Europe. But what none of them knew was that behind every diamond, there was a memory of struggle. As I adjusted the clasp of a necklace, one I designed after my father's death, I heard my assistant, Mia, rush in with wide eyes. Ava, you won't believe who just RSVP'd late to the gala. I smiled faintly. Let me guess, another critic? She shook her head, holding out a card. Linda Carter, your mother. My heart stopped for half a beat. What? She called the main office, Mia said cautiously. Said she's flying in tonight. Apparently, she told the staff she's your manager. I let out a slow breath, my pulse tightening. I shouldn't have been surprised. For someone who spent years downplaying my success, my mother had an uncanny ability to show up the moment it shone too bright to ignore. That evening, the gala hall glimmered like a dream. Cameras flashed. The air was heavy with perfume and money. And yet, I felt grounded, not like the girl who used to shrink beside her mother, but like the woman who had finally built something that couldn't be taken away. Then she appeared. Linda Carter entered the room draped in a gown that screamed old money, emerald silk, diamond earrings that didn't quite match her expression. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled that polished smile I'd grown up dreading. Ava, she said, reaching out, you look stunning. The papers are calling you the next big thing in luxury design. I suppose I should start saying, I always knew you would make it. I looked at her hand, then at her. Funny, I said calmly. You once said my designs would end up at flea markets. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes did. I was wrong, she said quickly, lowering her tone. We all make mistakes. But tonight isn't the time for grudges. Everyone here knows we're family. Let's just act like it. Her words hit harder than she realized. Act like it. That had been her mantra my whole life. Act happy, act perfect, act successful. Never be real. I straightened. I don't need to act anymore, Mom. Before she could respond, the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ava Carter, designer of this year's exclusive Lumiere collection. Applause erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. My name filled the room, louder than her judgment ever had. I walked up to the stage, heart pounding in rhythm with the applause. From up there, I saw her, standing still, tears glimmering just under the surface of her pride. When I spoke, I didn't look away. This collection is dedicated to anyone who is ever told they weren't enough. Sometimes, the people closest to us can't see our light until it blinds them. Gasps, then silence. Cameras zoomed in, and my mother lowered her gaze. For the first time, I saw understanding, not defeat but recognition. The applause that followed wasn't just for the jewels. It was for survival. And I had never sparkled brighter. When the applause finally faded, I stepped off the stage and let the lights dim behind me. My hands were trembling, not from nerves, but from something heavier, something real. It wasn't pride. It was freedom. The night had gone perfectly. The collection sold out within minutes. Critics called it emotion wrapped in crystal, and Laurent himself had toasted me with a glass of champagne, calling me the future of modern elegance. Yet as the cameras turned away, I noticed her, my mother, standing near the far edge of the ballroom, away from the crowd, her expression unreadable. The same woman who once told a stranger I'd never amount to anything now looked lost in a room celebrating my success. Mia approached, grinning ear to ear. Ava, you did it. Laurent's team already wants a second collection. That's incredible, I said, smiling faintly. Can you excuse me for a minute? She nodded, and I crossed the marble floor slowly, every step echoing louder than the music. My mother turned when she saw me coming. For the first time in my life, she didn't look ready to argue. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. You were amazing up there. Thank you, I said quietly. She hesitated. I shouldn't have said those things at the store. Or before that. I was harsh. I thought I was protecting you. I folded my arms, not in anger, but to keep from shaking.
No, Mom.
You were protecting yourself from being embarrassed by a daughter who didn't fit your idea of success. Her eyes glistened. Maybe you're right. I was scared. Your father believed in you, but I couldn't see what he saw. I just didn't want to lose control of everything after he passed. You lost control the moment you tried to cage what wasn't yours, I replied softly. You didn't lose me because I failed, Mom. You lost me because I stopped needing your approval. The words hung between us like smoke, slow, unrelenting, impossible to avoid. She swallowed hard. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to, I said. Just don't tear me down anymore. Silence. Then, in a whisper almost too quiet to hear, she said, I'm proud of you. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't an apology worthy of years of hurt, but it was the first time she'd ever said it, and part of me, the part that still remembered sitting on the floor sketching by lamplight, finally exhaled. I smiled faintly. That's all I ever wanted to hear. For a while, we just stood there. No more pretending. No more acting. Just two women, one learning how to let go, the other learning how to love from a distance. The gala slowly wound down, guests filtering out into the Paris night. I slipped onto the balcony overlooking the Seine, the city lights glittering like the diamonds that had changed everything. Mia joined me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To your first collection, she said, clinking mine. I smiled. And to the last time I ever let anyone make me feel small. She laughed softly. That's the Ava I know. I looked out at the city, the river shimmering below, the hum of music fading in the distance, and for the first time, I didn't feel the ache to prove anything. I'd already done it. When I returned home to New York a week later, there was a letter waiting for me. No return address, just my name in elegant handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple card. For every diamond you create, remember, you're the rarest one of all. Love, Mom. A single tear rolled down my cheek. Maybe she was changing. Maybe not. But it didn't matter. I'd already learned the most valuable lesson, that some people will never see your worth until the world does first. That night, I locked my studio, dimmed the lights, and stared at the sketches pinned across the wall. Each one was a piece of my past. Rejection, struggle, resilience, turned into beauty. I whispered to myself, "You did it, Ava. You did it without them." And somewhere deep inside, it finally felt true. Outside, New York glittered like Paris had, not because of the lights, but because I could finally see my own reflection in them. Not as someone's daughter. Not as someone's disappointment. Just me. A designer. A survivor. A woman who learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. As I walked to the window, the moon caught the edge of one of my newest designs, a ring shaped like a teardrop of light. I slipped it on, smiled, and whispered, "This one's for me." The world outside sparkled back. And for once, the silence didn't hurt. It glowed.
"You don't belong in this family," my dad snapped, his face red with rage. Then, without hesitation, he ripped the crisp white envelope in half, the job offer I'd worked my whole life for. My fingers trembled, my throat burned. But I didn't cry, because if I did, they'd win. Beside him, my sister Delaney leaned against the oak kitchen table with a lazy smirk, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "She only got the offer because they felt sorry for her," she muttered. "Let's be honest. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin." I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I could still hear the HR manager's voice on the call that morning. "We've never seen someone ace every single round with this much poise. Welcome aboard, Kendall." My name is Kendall James, and this job wasn't charity, it was mine. But standing there, watching my father rip it in half in front of everyone, my mom silently washing dishes like she'd heard nothing, my brother Jason checking his phone, and Delaney glowing like a victor, I realized something. They never wanted me to succeed. They never thought I could. Dad tossed the torn offer onto the kitchen floor like garbage. "You think you're better than your sister? She knows her place. You're always chasing dreams like some lost child. We didn't raise you for this corporate crap." My lips parted, but no words came. For years, I'd tried to earn his respect, pushed myself through college without help, took side jobs, skipped meals, graduated top of my class. But in this house, none of it mattered. "You're just a temp waitress with a degree no one asked for," Delaney added with a cruel grin. She had a point. For the past 4 months, I'd been doing waitressing gigs while applying for real opportunities. No one in this house believed I'd make it. Until this offer came. A 6-figure corporate role at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the state. And now, it lay in ruins at my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just turned away. But what they didn't know was that my husband, Logan, had seen it all, quietly watching from the front door, still dressed in his black suit from the meeting he'd just stepped out of. He had one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the shoulder of an older man in a navy coat, the same man who signed the letter they just tore apart, the owner of the company. Dad saw them last. His mouth froze mid-sentence, Delaney's eyes widened. And the silence that filled that room, it was electric. The tension in the room could slice skin. My father's eyes flicked from Logan to the older man beside him, and suddenly the air shifted, like a wolf pack, sensing danger. Delaney's smirk dropped as the man in the navy coat stepped forward with a commanding presence. His sharp eyes scanned the room before resting on the torn paper at my feet. "Is this how you treat your daughter's achievements?" he asked calmly, his voice smooth but laced with quiet authority. No one spoke, not even my mother, who finally turned from the sink, wiping her wet hands nervously on her apron. I didn't know who you were," Dad finally stuttered. "Sir, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," the man replied. My heart thudded. I'd never seen my father at a loss for words. He was a man who always had something to say, especially when it came to belittling me. Logan placed his hand gently on my lower back. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I felt the weight of his touch, steady, reassuring. He leaned in and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. I told you. You wouldn't have to fight them alone anymore. The man in the coat walked toward me and extended his hand. Kendall, I'm Greg Whitman, founder and chair of Whitman Consulting. Your work stood out far above the others. That letter you were sent, ripped or not, was just the beginning. We were actually hoping to offer you a more senior role, effective immediately. My mouth opened. Wait, what? Greg smiled warmly. Logan showed me your freelance business plans, your data reports. The way you think. It's rare. The job was already yours. But after speaking with Logan this afternoon, we realized we were aiming too low. I want you leading one of our new development units in New York, if you're willing. My hands shook. Yes, I'm willing. Delaney took a step forward, her voice suddenly sweet. Wow, Kendall, that's amazing. I didn't know you were working with Mr. Whitman. Maybe you could help me get in too? I mean, I've always looked up to you. I turned slowly. Looked up to me? I said softly. You just said I only got the job out of pity. Delaney's lips twitched, caught in her own lies. Greg's gaze sharpened. I don't think we'll be needing any more James family recommendations. Thank you. Dad swallowed hard. His face was pale now, his voice quieter. Kendall, we were just trying to push you to be stronger. That's all. I didn't realize. You never did, I said. And I stopped waiting for you to try. I bent down, picked up the shredded offer letter, and calmly handed it to Logan. He smiled, folded the pieces neatly, and placed them in his coat pocket. Souvenir, he said, for the day she left your limits behind. Nobody spoke as we walked toward the door. And as we stepped outside, the evening air sharp with autumn chill, I finally exhaled. But inside my chest, something deeper was stirring. Not just relief, resolve. Because this wasn't just about a job offer. This was about reclaiming my voice, and I was only just getting started. I didn't go back to that house for weeks, not even a call. But it didn't take long for the messages to start. At first, it was text from my mom. Come by sometime, your dad didn't mean it. Then voicemails from Delaney. Can we talk? I think we got off on the wrong foot. Even Jason, my brother who never once defended me, left a cryptic. You should know what they're planning. I ignored them. Until one day, Logan handed me his phone. Kendall, he said carefully, you need to hear this. It was a recorded call. Jason had secretly sent it. My father's voice crackled through the speaker, bitter and venomous. She embarrassed me in front of everyone, my own daughter, acting like she's better than us. And with her husband too, smug little punk, pulling strings with that Whitman guy. I don't care what offer she got, I'm cutting her off. No inheritance, no contact. Then Delaney's voice. Dad, calm down. We can still fix this. Let me apply to Whitman too. Maybe if I say Kendall referred me. You think she'll help you after you treated her like that? She's got her own agenda now. Then maybe we flip the story. Say she lied about the job, about Logan. Spread a little doubt. People always believe the loudest voice first. Silence, and then laughter. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just resentment. They wanted to ruin me. I stood up from the couch in disbelief. They were going to lie about me? Logan's jaw tightened. They still might, but they won't get far. I've already contacted HR. We're locking your name in files from internal referrals. They won't be able to fake anything. My stomach turned. All my life, I'd assumed if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, they'd come around. But now I saw the truth. This wasn't just a toxic family, it was a battlefield. And they'd drawn first blood. The next week, Greg Whitman invited Logan and me to a dinner party with senior execs. It was formal, high-end, and packed with some of the most respected people in the business world. I wore a sleek navy dress, Logan in a tailored black suit. The moment we walked in, people turned. Because I wasn't just someone's daughter anymore, I was someone they needed to meet. The night was surreal. Conversations about international expansion, innovation boards, upcoming IPOs, and in the middle of it all, me. At one point, Greg pulled me aside. I want you to know, he said gently, people like your family, they don't get to define you. You've earned everything that's coming, and we're just getting started. I nodded, barely holding back the sting in my eyes. But later that night, as Logan and I returned home, there was a car parked across the street. Jason, I stepped out before Logan could stop me. He rolled down the window and motioned me over. I had to warn you, he said. Dad's trying to file something against Logan. Some kind of bogus complaint about manipulation or insider influence. Says Logan pressured Greg to hire you. I clenched my jaw. Is he serious? Jason looked tired. For the first time, maybe even regretful. He's angry. He thinks you humiliated him. He's making it personal. I stood in silence for a second, then said, he made it personal the second he tore that letter. Jason leaned back. I never said it before, but you didn't deserve any of it. I gave a small, dry smile. You all let it happen. Then I turned and walked away. Because I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to win. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived at our door. Thick, official, sealed with the Whitman Company crest. Inside, it wasn't paperwork or promotion notices, it was evidence. A printed transcript, attached emails, proof that my father had contacted not just HR, but 2 board members. He'd fabricated a story that Logan had bribed Greg Whitman, that I'd lied on my resume, that my marriage was a sham for career gain. It was so outrageous, so painfully desperate. It should have made me laugh, but it didn't. It made me furious. Logan watched me as I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling, my chest heaving. They really did it, I whispered. They really tried to destroy me. Greg had already seen it. He included a personal note. Thought you should be aware of what was said behind your back. None of it holds any weight with us, but you deserve to know. Let me know how you want to proceed. Logan sat down across from me. We could pursue legal action, defamation, false claims to a corporation. It's real, it's serious, but I shook my head. No, that's what they want. They want to turn this into a war, drag us down to their level. He waited, watching me carefully. Then what do you want? I looked down at the last page, one that listed a string of donations made in my father's name to Whitman's charitable division. They were small but recurring, from years ago, likely to win favor or curry attention. I smiled. It was cold, calculated. I want to do it the way they never expected, I said. Not with a lawsuit, not with drama. Logan raised a brow. With what then? I looked up at him. Power. At the next Whitman board meeting, Greg made a special announcement. A new team was being formed, the Innovation and Ethics Committee, and I was made the founding chair. It meant oversight, internal audits, transparency, and it meant I had access to every document and every backdoor channel my father once thought he could abuse. The irony was delicious. Meanwhile, word got out that someone from my family had attempted to sabotage my career, and the business community responded exactly how you'd expect. They closed their doors to him. Sponsorships dried up, invitations stopped coming. Suddenly, the James name wasn't respected anymore. It was a warning sign. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene, but they felt it every single day. Until one evening, I got a call from my mom. She sounded frail, shaken. Your father isn't doing well, she said quietly. He's not sleeping. He lost the bid on the town project. Delaney hasn't found a new job. We've been struggling. I stayed quiet. Then she added, he asked if you'd be willing to talk, just once. I sat there for a long time, staring at the skyline outside my window. This was the man who told me I didn't belong in his family, and now he was asking for a conversation. I took a breath. Tell him I'll meet him. Logan looked at me across the room. Are you sure? No, I admitted, but I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me. Because forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing yourself from the weight they tried to put on you. I agreed to meet my father at the old diner off Main Street, the same one where he used to take us for pancakes when we were kids. The place hadn't changed much. Same cracked leather booths, same flickering neon sign. But I had changed. I walked in wearing a slate gray power suit, hair tied neatly back, heels echoing on the linoleum floor. My presence wasn't loud, but it commanded silence. He was already seated in the corner, looking smaller than I remembered. A man once too proud to bend now hunched over a chipped mug of black coffee, his eyes fixed on the table as if it held all the answers he'd lost. He looked up when I approached, and for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar in my father's eyes. Shame. Kendall, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thanks for coming. I sat down slowly, crossing my legs, meeting his gaze without blinking. I'm not here to make peace, Dad. I'm here to listen. You wanted to talk, So talk. He flinched. The weight of his pride, so long worn like armor, seemed to crumble around him. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I know I messed up, he said. I messed up bad. With you. With everything. He paused, swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd become what you've become. You were always stubborn. I thought I had to beat the softness out of you. I leaned in, voice low and firm. What you called softness was ambition, discipline, self-respect. You tried to crush it because it didn't look like you. He didn't argue, didn't deny it, didn't shift blame. Just sat there with the silence ringing louder than his apology. He reached into his coat and pulled out something, a folded sheet of paper. I recognized it immediately, my offer letter, the original. Not the one he tore. He must have kept a copy. I tried to tape it back together, he muttered. I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted something to remind me how wrong I was. I stared at it, not with anger, not with pity, but with clarity. You didn't believe in me, I said. Not when I applied for colleges, not when I worked late shifts and studied all night, not when I showed you that business plan. You saw Delaney's comfort as strength and my drive as rebellion. He winced. I was afraid. Afraid that if you left us behind, you'd never look back. And maybe I wouldn't have, I said coldly, if it weren't for Logan and Greg and people who actually saw me for who I was instead of who they wanted me to be. He went quiet again. Kendall, he said after a long pause, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I'm proud. And if you ever need anything, I stood up. That's the difference between us, I said. You only offer support when it benefits you. I don't need anything from you. Not anymore. He looked up, eyes damp, but still proud enough not to let a tear fall. Before I turned to leave, I reached into my own purse and placed something on the table. A photo. It was from my first day at Whitman HQ, me in front of the company sign. Smiling, powerful, unapologetically, me. Frame it, I said. Maybe someday, when people ask what happened to your daughter, you can tell them she became something no one expected. Then I walked out. Months passed. I spearheaded Whitman's expansion program into 3 cities. I was featured on a Forbes list for emerging leadership. Delaney, still job hopping. Jason, quietly trying to distance himself from Dad. My mother? She texted occasionally, but the weight of the truth kept her at bay. And my father? He never reached out again, but I heard from a friend that he kept that photo on his desk. Funny, isn't it? The daughter he tore down became the only legacy he had left to display. One evening, Logan and I stood on the balcony of our apartment overlooking the city skyline, the same city I once thought would never open its doors to me. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arm around my waist. I smiled. I think I finally am. Because the truth is, sometimes your real family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one that sees you, believes in you, and stands beside you when your own blood tries to cut you down. I didn't just survive, I rose, and no one would ever tear me down again.
I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Not when I gave birth alone. Not when the pain clawed through my body like fire. Not even when the nurse looked at me with quiet pity and asked, "Is anyone coming to pick you up?" Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I was 20 years old, lying in a cold hospital bed, my son in my arms, and silence in my phone. The one person I had hoped would show up, my own mother, was the same person who slammed the door in my face. "You've humiliated us," she'd screamed at me weeks earlier when I came home pregnant. She didn't even let me get past the porch. "You've destroyed your father's name. You've disgraced this family." Then she turned her back and locked the door behind her like I was filth. I remember standing there in the rain, hands on my belly, numb from head to toe. That was the last time I looked back at that house. I gave birth with no one beside me. No mother's hand to hold. No soft voice telling me it would be okay. Just me and my son, and the quiet strength I didn't even know I had until that night. The moment they laid him on my chest, something inside me shifted. I wasn't broken. I wasn't ashamed. I was his mother. And from that second on, I promised myself that I would never let him feel what I felt. Never. So I gathered what little I had, bundled my newborn son in a blanket that smelled like industrial detergent, and stepped out of that hospital with no plan, no money, and no one waiting for me. But I walked out with purpose. Because sometimes, when everyone turns their back on you, that's when you start becoming something more. I stayed in a tiny room above a laundromat that first year. The air smelled like bleach, and the floor creaked with every step. I worked nights cleaning offices. I took online classes during the day, while Mason slept in a second-hand crib beside me. Some nights, when he cried and I was so tired I could barely lift my head, I used to whisper to him, "You're not a mistake. You're my miracle." And I meant it. I missed meals so he could eat. I wore the same shoes for 4 years straight. I studied hard, worked harder. Every door that slammed in my face fueled something inside me I didn't even have words for yet. I didn't date, didn't party. I was a ghost to the world. But I was building something real, slowly, painfully, but with fire. By the time Mason turned 10, I'd gotten my business degree and launched a small virtual assistant company. I started with 1 client, then 2, then 5. I was making more money than I ever imagined back in that freezing laundromat room. I remember the first time Mason and I moved into an apartment with real heating. He looked around the empty living room, eyes wide, and said, "This is all ours?" I smiled, tears in my eyes. Every bit of it. We bought a couch, a table, curtains. It wasn't much, but it was home. I didn't meet Derek the way you'd expect someone like me to meet someone like him. It was messy, stupid, and ironically, at a gas station. I was late for a client meeting. Mason had thrown up on my shirt that morning, and I was wearing a black blazer over a hoodie. I was juggling a coffee, a laptop bag, and a grocery bag when someone stepped back without looking and bumped right into me, spilling everything. "Oh my God," I started, flustered. But the man turned, and before I could unload my usual New York sarcasm, he looked at me and smiled. "I'm so sorry. That one's on me." He helped me gather my things. Then he held the door open. Then he offered to buy me a new coffee. I almost said no, but I was tired. And something about his face, kind eyes, steady voice made me pause. "All right," I said. "Just coffee." One coffee turned into a conversation. That conversation turned into a lunch. Lunch turned into dinner 2 weeks later. And that dinner, that's when I learned who he really was. Not just Derek, but Derek Sullivan. The Derek Sullivan, the tech billionaire, CEO of Sullivan Innovations. The man behind half the startups in Manhattan. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was being punked, but it was real. And the crazy part? He didn't care that I was a single mom. He didn't care that I didn't come from money or that I didn't have a last name that meant something. He just saw me. And for the first time since Mason was born, I let someone in. We married quietly. Mason was my best man. Derek didn't want cameras or magazine covers. He just wanted us. By year 3, I had my own company running independently, a consulting firm rising fast, and a seat on 2 boards that used to laugh when I pitched ideas as a broken turn. I never reached out to my mother. Not once. But when I saw her that day, 15 years after she turned her back on me, I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace. She showed up outside our penthouse building looking like a shadow of the woman I remembered. Her hair was thinner, her skin dull, but her eyes still carried that familiar blend of pride and judgment. Until they didn't. Until she saw Derek step out of the car, hand in mine. And then her mouth dropped. "That's him," she stammered. "That's Derek Sullivan." I nodded. Calmly. "My husband." Her knees buckled. She collapsed right there on the sidewalk. And I didn't move. Because I remembered standing outside that house at 29 months pregnant, hearing that door slam. She left me in the rain with nothing. I left her on the pavement with everything she'd lost. She came back 2 days later. I was on the balcony with Mason, watering the plants, when the doorman called. Said there was a woman downstairs asking for me. Said she looked shaken, desperate, and refused to leave. I knew who it was before he even finished. I told him to let her up. Mason looked at me curiously. Who is it? No one important, I said. But someone I need to face. When she walked in, she hesitated in the doorway. Her eyes scanned the apartment slowly. The marble floors, the tall windows, the art on the walls. Her gaze finally landed on me. She looked like she didn't recognize me. I didn't blame her. I wasn't the scared girl from that night anymore. I'm sorry to show up like this, she said quietly. But I didn't know what else to do. I said nothing. She looked down, twisting the straps of her worn-out purse. After your father passed, I lost everything. Medical bills, loans, the house. I have nothing left. Still, I stayed quiet. She looked up, eyes already glassy. I've been sleeping on a friend's couch. I haven't eaten properly in days. And when I saw you the other day, I fainted because I realized I turned away the only person who would have stood by me. Don't make this sound noble, I said finally, voice calm. You didn't just turn me away. You made sure I had nowhere else to go. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to handle you being pregnant. You didn't even try, I replied. I begged. I cried. You slammed the door anyway. She nodded, wiping her face with shaking hands. You're right. I can't undo what I did. But I'm still your mother. That word felt heavy. She took a step forward. Please. Just a little help. I'll disappear after that. I swear. I went to my desk, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to her. She opened it, hands trembling. It was a check. Enough to settle debts, get an apartment, eat for months. Her eyes widened. This is too much. It's not, I said. It's what I owe myself, not you. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. This doesn't mean we're okay, I told her. It doesn't mean I forgive you. It just means I'm no longer the girl you left behind. She looked at me, eyes filled with something between regret and shame. Can I meet Mason? She asked. No, I said flatly. He doesn't need to know what abandonment feels like. She bit her lip, nodded slowly, and left without another word. I stood at the door long after it closed. Not because I was sad, but because I felt free. That night, I sat at the edge of Mason's bed, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell in rhythm, one arm thrown over his forehead, a slight snore escaping his lips. He was 15 but still my little boy. He had no idea his grandmother had been in our home just hours earlier. And he didn't need to. He didn't need to know the version of me who stood on a porch at 20, crying and begging to be let in. He only knew this version, strong, calm, steady. The woman who never let him see her break. I brushed his hair back and whispered, You saved me, kid. Because he had. A week passed. I thought maybe that was the end of it. But then she showed up again. This time at my office. I was in a meeting when my assistant slipped me a note. There's a woman here. Won't leave. Says it's family. I stepped out and saw her in the waiting area, wearing the same cardigan, eyes wide and anxious. I told you not to come here, I said, voice low and firm. I know. I'm sorry. She stood quickly, fumbling with something in her bag. I wanted to give you this. She pulled out an old photograph. Me, at 8 years old, sitting on my dad's lap. My mother behind us, smiling stiffly. I kept it, she said. All these years. I didn't take it. Why are you really here? I asked. I just want to see you again, she whispered. You, Mason. I want to fix things. There's nothing to fix, I said. You made sure of that. Her eyes darted around the office. You have everything now. You don't need to be angry anymore. And that's when I understood. She didn't come because she regretted what she'd done. She came because I'd made it without her. Because I had what she didn't. And it stung. I'm not angry, I said. I'm indifferent. That's worse. You're nothing to me now. I turned to walk away. Please, she called out. I'm your mother. I stopped. Not because of her voice, but because for a split second, I felt that old ache creep back in. the one that used to beg for love. But it didn't last long. I looked back at her and said, "No, you were." Then I walked away. Derek noticed the change in me that evening. We were in the kitchen, prepping dinner, when he asked, "She came back again, didn't she?" I nodded. He set the knife down gently. "You okay?" I didn't yell, I said. I didn't cry. I just told her the truth. He reached over and touched my hand. "You don't need to explain. You don't owe her anything." I swallowed hard. It's weird. I thought I'd feel something, satisfaction, closure. But I just don't care anymore. "That's growth," he said. "That's you becoming someone she can't reach." I looked at him. This man who had never once made me feel less than, who loved Mason like his own, who never saw my past as baggage. I knew in that moment I had everything I ever needed. Not because of money. Not because of the title on my office door. But because I had a home. A real one. I never told Mason the full story. I just told him that some people in life are meant to be lessons, not family. And he understood more than I expected. "She missed out," he said one night while we sat on the balcony. "You're the best person I know." That one sentence healed more than any apology ever could. The final time she showed up, it wasn't in person. It was a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in shaky cursive. I opened it slowly. It was only one page. Inside, she wrote that she was moving to a different state to stay with a distant cousin. Said she understood now that I didn't want her in my life, and that she wouldn't try again. At the end, she wrote, "I hope someday you find it in your heart to forgive me. Not for me, but for yourself." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not because I forgave her, but because I needed to stop carrying her choices with me. Her shame was never mine. Her rejection wasn't a reflection of my worth. I made a life without her. And I made sure my son would never know the weight of begging for love. Mason's high school graduation came on a warm June morning. He wore his cap crooked and his tie loose, nervous energy buzzing through him as we walked into the stadium. Derek sat beside me, his arm draped gently over the back of my chair, the sun catching on his wedding ring. I watched my son walk across the stage and take his diploma with a proud, confident smile. And I realized this was it. This was the moment I'd been chasing all my life. Not money, not status, not revenge, but this. Watching my son become everything I never got to be when I was 20, safe, loved, unafraid. People came up to us afterward, shaking Mason's hand, complimenting me. One woman asked what I did for work, and I told her. She blinked and said, "Oh, you're Ava Reed. I've heard your name everywhere." I smiled. "That's me." We took pictures. We laughed. Mason shoved cake in my face later at dinner, and I didn't even mind. I didn't think about my mother. Not once. Until we got home. There was a message on the landline. One I'd forgotten we even had. It was her voice. "I heard Mason graduated," she said. "I wasn't there, I know I shouldn't have called. I just wanted to say congratulations. That's all. He must be amazing. You did good." She paused for a moment, then hung up. I deleted the message. I didn't need it, because in the end, she had no idea how amazing he truly was, or how much we had built from nothing, or how powerful silence can be when it's chosen, not forced. I sat on the edge of Mason's bed again that night, just like I did when he was a baby. "You proud of me?" he asked, looking up at the ceiling. I smiled. Every second. He turned to me. "Are you happy now?" I thought for a long time before I answered. "I think I've always been happy," I said. "I just had to fight for it." He didn't say anything else. He just reached out and held my hand until he fell asleep. And that's how the story ends. Not with doors slamming. Not with tears. But with peace. The kind you earn when you survive the fire and come out brighter than ever.
"You're not coming upstairs," Ashley hissed. Before I could respond, my sister grabbed my wrist and shoved me hard. So hard my back hit the cold concrete wall of the basement. "Ashley, what are you doing? I'm your sister," I gasped, stunned. my voice echoing down the stairwell. The door slammed, the lock clicked, and just like that, I was trapped. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I stood frozen, barefoot on the dusty cement floor, my hands trembling. The pale dress I'd ironed the night before was now smudged from the wall. From the tiny window above, I could hear laughter, the click of heels, the rustling of satin dresses. Ashley's wedding was happening just 20 feet above me. I was never meant to be part of it. "You're not pretty enough to be seen today," she'd said earlier while curling her hair in the bridal suite. "I don't want you standing next to me in pictures. You'll ruin them." I thought she was just being cruel in her usual passive-aggressive way. I didn't think she'd actually lock me away. The basement reeked of mildew and forgotten furniture. I tried to call someone. My phone wasn't in my purse. It must have fallen out in the chaos. Tears stung my eyes, not from the insult. I'd gotten used to Ashley's venom over the years, but from the sharp humiliation of being discarded. I was 27. I paid my own rent. I worked 2 jobs to survive. And yet, here I was, treated like trash in my own family. The worst part? I had no one here. My husband, Mason, was supposed to come later. He had a last-minute client emergency and said he'd try to make it before the cake cutting. I had texted him earlier. "Don't worry, it's just a wedding. See you later." God, if only I had told him what Ashley said. The lights flickered. I sat down on an overturned laundry basket and pulled my knees in tight. Then, I heard a voice. "No, where's my wife?" It echoed through the house. It was Mason. I jolted to my feet. I said, "Where is she?" He shouted. My heart pounded. I ran to the door and banged hard. "Mason!" Footsteps thundered overhead. Fast, furious. Then, boom! The door burst open. And there he was. Mason, eyes blazing, jaw clenched, breathing hard, like he'd just run through fire to get to me. Behind him, I saw my mother's horrified face and the groomsmen staring. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, took one look at me, and lifted me into his arms. My dusty dress, my bare feet, my messy hair. He didn't care. "You locked her in a basement for a photo?" He growled, turning to Ashley, who had just come down in her lace-covered gown. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but the photographer, silent until now, raised his camera. Click! The flash lit up the moment Mason carried me up the stairs. The entire room froze, except the lens, which turned away from the bride and toward me. I sat in the passenger seat of Mason's car, still barefoot, still shaking. We had driven in silence for 10 minutes before he finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly, eyes fixed on the road. I didn't know how to answer. Because it felt normal? Because Ashley had always done things like this, and somehow I'd convinced myself I deserved it? "She told me I'd ruin the wedding photos," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Mason's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "And your mother let her do that?" I looked out the window. My mom just said, "Try not to make this about you." That was her go-to phrase. She used it when I cried as a kid, when Ashley shoved me in high school, when I worked 2 jobs to pay for college and couldn't afford to fly home for holidays. Mason pulled into a gas station and parked. "I need to know," he said, turning toward me. "Is this how they always treat you?" I felt exposed, raw. Like I'd been caught hiding bruises I didn't even realize I had. I nodded. Mason sat back in his seat and exhaled slowly. "Not anymore. Not anymore." We drove home to our small townhouse in Silverwood. Mason ran me a bath, ordered dinner, and didn't ask any more questions that night. He just sat beside me and held my hand like he was afraid I'd slip away. But something had changed. Not just in Mason, in me. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating. It was buzzing with notifications, messages, missed calls. I frowned. My cousin Leah. "Girl, you're trending on TikTok." My heart dropped. I clicked the link she sent. There it was. The clip. Me in Mason's arms. Ashley's face frozen in shock. The moment the photographer's camera turned, someone had recorded it from their phone. It had a caption. "When the bride locks her sister in a basement and her husband shows up like a movie hero." Over 4 million views. I blinked in disbelief. A second clip showed Ashley screeching at the photographer, "Delete that picture," and him replying calmly, "No." That was the only real moment of the day. Thousands of comments, strangers defending me, calling out Ashley, praising Mason. Then, another message came in from someone I never expected. My biological father, the one who left when I was 8, the one no one ever talked about. He wrote, "Saw the video. I have something you need to know. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, something twisted in my stomach, because deep down, I already knew everything in my life. Every cruel word, every cold shoulder, every locked door was about more than just jealousy. It was about who I was. And they had spent my whole life making sure I never found out. Mason was still asleep when I stepped onto the porch with a blanket wrapped around me and my phone clutched in my hand. I stared at the message from my biological father, David Kessler. That name hadn't been spoken in our household in nearly 2 decades. My mother used to refer to him only as the mistake I erased. I tapped out a shaky reply. "What do you want to tell me?" The response came instantly. "Meet me, 4 p.m., Cafe Linden, alone." I didn't tell Mason, not yet. Some answers. You just have to face alone. Cafe Linden was quiet when I arrived. I recognized him immediately, even through the years. His face was aged, lined with regret. He stood as I approached, his eyes searching mine. "Alina," he said, "you look just like her." "Who?" I asked, heart racing. He motioned to the chair. I sat, arms crossed, every cell in my body defensive. "Your real mother," he said quietly, "not the woman who raised you." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" I asked, stunned. "My mom is your aunt," he interrupted gently. "Your mother, my wife, died giving birth to you. Her sister, Ashley's mom, took you in when I broke down. I wasn't in my right mind. And she made me believe it was best, that you'd grow up safe. But they didn't keep you safe, Alina." My blood ran cold. He pulled something from his coat pocket and slid it across the table, a photograph of a younger woman, soft eyes, auburn curls, holding a baby, me. "I never wanted to disappear," he said, voice cracking, "but they made sure I stayed away." Everything started clicking. Why I was always treated like an outsider, why my mother was cold and my sister cruel, because I was never meant to be in that house. I wasn't their daughter. I was their secret. I returned home in a daze. Mason was waiting, pacing in the hallway. "Where were you?" he asked. "You disappeared on me." I walked right up to him, dropped the photo into his hand, and said, "That woman. That's my mother." He stared at it, then looked at me. "What do you mean?" So I told him everything, every word, every breath, every lie. And when I finished, he whispered, "They locked you in that basement because you're a threat to their picture-perfect lie." I nodded, tears in my eyes. But not anymore. That night, Mason uploaded a high-res version of the photo the wedding photographer had sent us privately, the one of him carrying me while everyone else stood frozen. He captioned it, "Not every fairy tale starts in a ballroom. Sometimes it begins in a basement." It went viral within hours. But what came next wasn't a fairy tale. Ashley's husband's family saw the video and began asking questions. The wedding photographer gave an interview. My mother called me nonstop, leaving voicemails that grew more and more desperate. Until finally, my lawyer called. "You need to come in. There's something about your inheritance, your biological mother's estate. It's been contested for years." I blinked. "My mother had an estate?" "Not just an estate," he replied. "She had a legacy, and now it's yours." The final photo wasn't the one Ashley posed for in her white gown. It was me, standing in front of a courthouse, holding the keys to a house I never knew I owned, with my husband by my side. And this time, the camera was exactly where it should have been. The drive to the estate felt like entering another world. Tucked behind a gated driveway in the hills of Vermont, the house loomed like something from an old movie. Elegant, timeless, weathered by secrets. The lawyer handed me the keys and said, "She left everything in your name. The land, the house, and the letters." "Letters?" I asked. He nodded. "They're in the study. She wrote one every year until she died. They were never mailed." Mason and I stepped through the front doors, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Everything smelled of old wood and lavender. There were portraits of her, my real mother, On the walls, framed in gold, a piano sat untouched in the corner. In the study, tucked inside a cedar box, I found the first letter. My sweet Alina. If you're reading this, it means you found your way back to me. I prayed you would. I know you'll have questions. I know life wasn't easy for you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from what they became. I sank to the floor as Mason kneeled beside me, his arms around my shoulders. Each letter peeled back more truth. My mother had built this home with love. She was an artist, a philanthropist, and quietly one of the largest donors to women's shelters across New England. She had built this life for me, and it had been stolen. Stolen by people who locked me in basements, who told me I wasn't pretty enough, who looked at me and only saw the shame of their choices. I stayed in the house for 3 days. By the fourth, news had broken. A journalist picked up the viral wedding story and followed the trail to the estate. A full exposé was written, how a woman grew up in a family that never told her the truth. The public turned. Ashley was bombarded online. Her new in-laws, embarrassed by the scandal, announced an annulment. As for my mother, my aunt, she finally called again. I let it ring. Then I answered. Alina, she breathed, you have to make this stop. You're destroying everything. No, I said calmly. I'm just finally showing the world what you tried to bury. You're making us look like monsters. I laughed, quiet, bitter. You locked your niece in a basement because she might ruin a picture. You did that without flinching. Silence. I want to make it right, she finally said. We're family. You only say that now because I have the house, the name. The truth. I hung up. Mason walked in with a cup of coffee. You okay? I nodded. I'm done hiding. He smiled and leaned down to kiss my forehead. Then it's time the world sees you. That weekend, we hosted a charity gala at the estate in honor of my mother, for women who had been silenced, discarded, overlooked. I stood in front of that crowd, shaking, nervous, vulnerable, and I told them everything. How I was locked away, how I was told I wasn't good enough, how I found my name in a letter written by the woman who gave me life. The crowd stood and applauded, but one person in the back stood frozen, Ashley. She looked smaller somehow, like the truth had finally caved in on her. And then, for the first time, she walked out, without a camera pointed at her. The spotlight no longer belonged to her. It belonged to me. The night after the gala, I stood barefoot on the marble steps of the estate, gazing out into the moonlit garden that once belonged to a woman I never got to meet, but who somehow knew me better than anyone else ever had. The whispers of applause still echoed in my ears. But what stuck with me most were the women who came up to me after I spoke. I felt invisible too. My sister said the same words to me before my wedding. You made me feel seen. I wasn't the only one who'd been locked in a metaphorical basement. I had just been the one foolish enough to think I had to stay there. 3 days later, I received a manila envelope at the estate's front gate. No name, no return address. Inside it were 2 things. 1, a photo, an old one, from my 12th birthday. I was off to the side of the frame, blowing out candles alone while Ashley and her friends smiled for the camera near the cake. 2, a typed letter. You were always brighter. We just didn't want the world to notice. We thought if we broke you down first, you'd never rise higher than us. Guess we were wrong. Anonymous. The paper trembled in my hand. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need it to be. I knew exactly who sent it. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. That week, I made the final decision. I hired an investigative attorney and had all estate documents reviewed. Turns out there had been a quiet attempt years ago by Ashley and my mother to contest the will of my real mom. They'd tried to sell off the property illegally, but were blocked. I had grounds, serious ones. But instead of pressing charges, I called a press conference. When the media arrived, I stood on the front steps and spoke from my gut. I won't press charges, but I will protect what was given to me. I will honor the woman who gave me life, and I will not allow the people who silenced me to rewrite this story again. That speech aired across national outlets. I didn't care about the fame. I cared about the impact, and impact it had. Foundations reached out, universities, women's groups, even publishing houses. Suddenly, I was the story, the girl who'd been hidden away. Now standing in the light. 6 months passed. The estate had been restored to its original beauty. I kept my mother's study untouched, except for one new addition. A framed photo on the wall. Mason carrying me out of that basement. Below it, a small gold plaque. Never again unseen. That fall, I walked into a bookstore in downtown Boston. My memoir had just been released. Title: Locked In, Let Out. It sat front and center on a wooden display. As I stared at the cover, a familiar voice whispered from behind me. I finished it in one sitting. I turned. Ashley stood there in a beige coat, dark circles under her eyes, no cameras, no filters. For the first time in years, she looked real. "You ruined us," she said softly. I met her eyes, calm, steady, no anger left. "No," I replied. "You ruined yourselves. I just stopped letting you do it to me." She didn't respond. She turned, walked out the door, and melted into the crowd. And I never saw her again. That night, I returned home. My home. Mason was in the kitchen, laughing at something on his phone. "What's so funny?" I asked, kicking off my heels. He held up the screen. A wedding photographer had posted a throwback on his page. The caption read, "Still the most powerful moment I've ever captured. A man kicking down a door for the woman they tried to bury." The photo was framed in black and white, my hair a mess, my eyes swollen. But I had never looked more alive. Mason looked at me and smiled. "You know, you never needed the camera turned toward you." I tilted my head. "Why's that?" "Because when people finally saw you, they couldn't look away." I walked over and wrapped my arms around him, and this time, no one would ever lock me away again.